Welcome back. For those who are just joining us, here until December 25th, I will be reading Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. This is a version of the original facsimile that I got while I was in London on my honeymoon. This original edition says it is a Christmas Carol in prose, being a ghost story of Christmas by Charles Dickens, with 4 illustrations in color and 4 woodcuts by John Leech, a facsimile of the original edition, with an introduction by J.K. Chesterton and a preface by B.W. Metz, London, Cecil Palmer, Oakley House, Bloomsbury Street, WC1. So, if you are just joining us, feel free to go back to the original video and watch from the beginning so that you're all caught up. Go grab yourself a drink and beverage of choice here. My favorites are, for this time of year, hot chocolate, eggnog, or some Christmas tea. But, dealer's choice there. A good old nightcap is never a dull moment either. So we will be splitting this up into staves. I am just partway through stave 1. In the original facsimile, there are 166 pages. So technically that's like 6.5 pages per day. So if you're wondering how I'm going to split this up over 25 days of reading, that's how it's going to be 6.5 pages per day. Now, last episode, I may have gone a little overboard and we may have gone to page 18. That being said, though, that's, a little over where we should be for stave 1. However, I'm just going to read 3 pages today and give you a little bit more of the history of A Christmas Carol. And then we will finish off stave 1 tomorrow night. And I will give you a little bit more history about A Christmas Carol as we go on. But to start us off, Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens started in 1843 in response to the harsh conditions of the Victorian era, or the known as such as the Hungry 40s era, specifically where there was a government report on child labor at the time. And this inspired works like Oliver Twist. It also inspired works like A Christmas Carol and The Little Match Girl and a couple of other ones. They were inspired by Dickens' own childhood and his experience, and a visit to a school for impoverished children at that time. The book was an immediate success because it was published in December, so right around Christmas time, and it is credited with helping to revive and popularize the festive celebration of Christmas. You can definitely look more into A Christmas Carol and its history, and its potent legacy, as well as, watch a plethora of movies and videos about it, including this one, and including the ones to follow, right up until December 25th. I'm sure that we'll discover a whole bunch of things together about this timeless classic. I do not own anything about this book. I own no copyright. I am merely just reading the classic in parts, and any copyrighted material belongs to Mr. Dickens, his represented parties, and his descendants. So if anyone comes back to me for reading out this classic, I'm only reading it word for word here, guys, to the best of my ability. Yes, my dyslexia gets in the way sometimes, but it's all here. So if there's any copyright infringement or anything, I'm sorry. Please don't demonetize me. I am literally reading it from the book, just as is. So without much further ado, we start at page 18, and I will reread the last paragraph that I read in the previous episode so you can catch up to where we are. The clerk promised that he would, and Scrooge walked out with a growl. The office was closed in a twinkling, and the clerk, with the long ends of his white comforter dangling below his waist, for he boasted no greatcoat, went down a slide on the Cornhill. At the end of the lane boys 20 times in honor of this being Christmas Eve, and then ran home to Camden Town as hard as he could pelt, to play at Blindman's Bluff. Scrooge took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers and beguiled the rest of the evening with his banker's book, went home to bed. He lived in chambers which had once belonged to his deceased partner. They were a gloomy suite of rooms, in a lowering pile of building up a yard, where it had so little business to be, that one could scarcely help fancying it must have run there when it was a young house, playing at hide-and-seek with other houses, and have forgotten the way out again. It was old enough now, and dreary enough, for nobody lived in it but Scrooge, the other rooms all being let out as offices. The yard was so dark that even Scrooge, who knew its every stone, and was fain to grope with his hands. The fog and frost so hung about the black old gateway of the house that it seemed as if the genius of the weather sat in mournful meditation on the threshold. Now it is a fact that there is nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door, except that it was very large. It is also a fact that Scrooge had seen it night and morning during this whole residence in that place. Also that Scrooge had as little of what is called fancy about him as any man in the city of London, even including, which is a bold word, the corporation, aldermen, and livery. Let it also be borne in mind that Scrooge had not bestowed one thought on Marley since his last mention of his 7 years dead partner that afternoon. And then let any man explain to me, if he can, how it happened that Scrooge, having his key in the lock of the door, saw in the knocker, without its undergoing any intermediate processes of change, not a knocker, but Marley's face. Marley's face. It was not an impenetrable shadow as the other objects in the yard were, but had a dismal light about it, like a bad lobster in a dark cellar. It was not angry or ferocious, but looked at Scrooge as Marley used to look, with a ghostly spectacle turned up on its ghostly forehead. The hair was curiously stirred, as if by breath or hot air, and though the eyes were wide open, they were perfectly motionless. That, and its livid color, made it horrible, but its horror seemed to be in spite of the face, and beyond its control, rather than a part of its own expression. As Scrooge looked fixedly at the phenomenon, it was a knocker again. To say that he was not startled, or that his blood was not conscious of a terrible sensation to which it had been a stranger from infancy would also be untrue. But he had put his hand upon the key and had relinquished, turned it sturdily, walked in and lighted his candle. He did pause, with a moment's irresolution before he shut the door, and he did look cautiously behind it first, as if he half expected to be terrified with the sight of Marley's pigtail sticking out into the hall. But there was nothing on the back of the door, except the screws and nuts that held the knocker on. So he said, "Pooh-pooh," and closed it with a bang. The sound resounded through the house like thunder. Every room above and every cask in the wine merchant's cellars below appeared to have a separate peal of echoes of its own. Scrooge was not a man to be frightened by echoes. He fastened the door and walked across the hall and up the stairs, slowly too trimming his candles as he went. You may talk vaguely about driving a coach and six up a good old flight of stairs, or though a bad young Act of Parliament, but I mean to say you might have got a hearse up that staircase and taken it broadwise, with the splintered bar towards the wall and the door towards the balustrades, and done it easily. There was plenty of width for that, and room to spare, which is perhaps the reason why Scrooge thought he saw a locomotive hearse going on before him in the gloom. Half a dozen gas lamps out of the street wouldn't have lightened the entry too well, so you may suppose that it was pretty dark with Scrooge's dip. Up Scrooge went, not caring a button for that. Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. But before he shut his heavy door, he walked through his rooms to see all was right. He had just enough recollection of the face to desire to do that. And that's where we stop for tonight. So tune in tomorrow for the rest of Stave 1. I did mention in a previous video that they are called staves, not chapters. That being because a Christmas carol of the name. So we will continue with Stave 1 tomorrow night, and we will finish up there. See you tomorrow.